Judge Roy Moore called her a prevert on one reason, because she was gay. If he called her a prevert, he called your child a prevert if she was gay, or your son was gay. This is something people need to stop and think about. You're supposed to uphold the Constitution. The Constitution said all men are created equal. Well, how's my daughter a prevert just because she was gay? Does it mean she was born gay? I don't know the answer to that. But she was gay. There she is.
Are you a man of faith?
Am I a man of faith? Yes, I am.
Being out here tonight, what do you hope to accomplish?
I don't know what I'll accomplish. I really don't. I had mixed emotions about coming, but somebody needs to speak up. And if it's all to no avail, so be it. It won't be the first time I've done something to no avail, okay?
How far of a drive
But my
was it?
sign there speaks for itself, and my sign is true. Sir?
How far of a drive was this for you?
I'm only about 15 to 20 miles away. I was born here in Midland City.
So are you suggesting that the suicide of your daughter was because of...
No, I'm
things
not
that were said
I'm not suggesting that. I was anti-gay myself. I said bad things to my daughter myself, which I regret. But I can't take back what happened to my daughter. But stuff like saying my daughter's a prevert, sure, I'm sure that bothered her. Now, you know, Judge Moore not just said my daughter. He didn't call my daughter by name. He said all gay people are preverts, abominations. That's not true. We don't need a person like that representing us in Washington.
Welcome to the Michael Brooks Show. I'm Michael Brooks. We're broadcasting live from Brooklyn, Left is Best headquarters with super producer Matt Leck.
Hello there.
Bringing it down a little bit, Matty. Super producer David Slavic. He is on the Discord. He's roaming Twitter. He's the digital gorilla of the operation. Theoretician and chief David Griscom. He's here. He's eager to get on mic. Did that come through? Go for it again. Do that Texas thing again, man.
How are y'all doing?
Boom. There it is. On today's program, Nathan Robinson of Current Affairs. We're talking about Ben Schapiro, cool kids philosopher or sophist little twerp. Maybe I'm burying the lead here, but we'll explain how we get there. Dick Coughlan, he is a iconic YouTuber. He's a funny guy. He's joining me for a little bit of an extended pyramid segment because we are throwing Dave Rubin in it. I'm sure we'll let him out on a furlough and throw him back in again. One of the biggest pests of the internet age. We're going to take a whack at him tonight. And then Alyona Minkovski, which I know I mispronounced. Minkovski. Alyona Minkovski. I got to just think I'm like Polish here. Alyona Minkovski. She's Michael Brooks Show crew. She's joining us in studio. We're talking about the results as they come in from Alabama. Donald Trump's decision to inflame Israel-Palestine, but formalize what U.S. foreign policy, in fact, already is. And a whole lot more. Plus, we've got some new sound from Nelson Mandela's radio show responding to the controversy of last week that we were involved in, and new news from Barack Obama, which implicates this show and his program and even potential patrons. You're really going to want to hear this. This is a jam-packed show, and of course, Alyona's staying with me through the post-game. Thanks, patrons. Thanks, everyone. Let's go. Let's start with a really, really exceptional speech that the UK Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn gave in Geneva at United Nations headquarters in Geneva a couple of days ago, where he outlined a new model of global human rights, which is really integrative and speaks directly to our time. Now, obviously, there's several different facets of human rights. There's human rights as we commonly understand, and is true, in fact. There's regimes across the world which could identify as right or left or center. There's U.S. prop-backed regimes. There's Russian propped and backed regimes that violate human rights as we understand it commonly. They engage in mass killing. There's significant limitations on the press, jailing of political prisoners, and silencing of dissent. Even though no Western nations fully fulfill any type of commitment to upholding that type of human rights, we at least commonly understand those parameters of human rights. Those are important. Of course, we're going to need to add the historical and present reality that we don't live up to those conditions and connect it, which Jeremy Corbyn did brilliantly in this speech, with economic human rights and the reality that capitalism and global oligarchy is incompatible with human rights, as well as the consequences of a global despoiled environment and accelerated climate change and the class dimensions of that. Jeremy Corbyn set this up historically by talking about those sort of doublespeak, double conditions, and the historical reality of Salvador Allende, who everyone needs to know about. Let's take a little listen from his speech here now.
The world's largest corporations and banks cannot be left to write the rules and rig the system for themselves. The world's economy can and must deliver for the common good and the majority of its people. But that is going to demand real and fundamental structural change at an international level. The United Nations has a pivotal role to play in advancing a new consensus and a common ground based on solidarity, respect for human rights, international regulation and cooperation. That includes a platform for democratic leaders to speak truth about unaccountable power, as has happened in this very chamber and in New York. One such moment took place on the 4th of December 1972, when President Salvador Allende of Chile, elected as president of his country despite huge opposition, took to the rostrum at the General Assembly in New York. He called for global action against the threat from transnational corporations that do not answer to any state, any parliament, or any organization representing the common interests. 9 months later, Salvador Allende was killed in General Augusto Pinochet's brutal coup, and that ushered in 17 years of dictatorship and turned Chile into a laboratory for free market fundamentalism. But 44 years on, all over the world, people are standing up and saying enough to the unchained power of multinational companies to dodge taxes, grab land and resources on the cheap, and rip the heart out of workforces and communities.
So that's perfect, because that coup, the CIA-backed coup at the behest of U.S. corporations to destroy Salvador Allende's effort to essentially implement a moderate social democratic program in Chile, exemplifies all of the trends he's talking about, from contradictions inside U.S. foreign policy and Western foreign policy to the reality that you cannot separate economic justice with the other norms of justice that are broadly agreed upon rhetorically in the Western world. The other aspect that's happening here is that we are finally having leaders. Bernie Sanders has also been talking about the global oligarchy, and inequality is the preeminent human rights issue of the time, who recognized that the disconnect that happened in the 1990s, when you had these great liberations, the fall of the Soviet Union, the fall of apartheid South Africa, that heralded in a new wave of openings of human rights, of democratic participation, but were coupled with corporate power, austerity, and rape and pillaging on behalf of the global oligarchy across, whether it be the former Soviet bloc or Africa, contradicted those movements to the point where you couldn't substantively say, even at the time, we were really in a serious fundamental structuring of a democratic wave. And now those movements themselves have been so hollowed out by the logic of capitalism that, of course, even the things that we celebrated in terms of initial openings have been totally undermined, as in the case of state capture in South Africa, or the reality of Putin's Russia. You can't have human rights without economic rights. And in the future, anytime some oligarch is hanging out at some ballroom talking about human rights, if you're able to look them in the face, and I don't know why you would be, you can say, it's your fault. You're part of the problem. If you want this global human rights wave, then get taxed at 70% of your net worth. And that's how we do it. This is an incredibly important step forward, and it's a guy who I think will become the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, speaking from the position of the seat of Western Empire. It's powerful stuff. In some ways, that was a shout out. That was interesting. I don't usually turn the commentaries into shout outs. They're usually more like condemnations. They're trend and brand insights or condemnations, not usually shout outs. That was a new vibe. And now we got to go to the shout out. I can't believe. So the only reason we're still using Birdman for the shout out music is because my friend, who I am about to shout out, Luke Mayville, who is a patron of the show, insisted that we use Birdman again for his shout out. So I have no choice. Did you know that Birdman dates Tony Braxton? Isn't that fucking weird? I just found that out the other day. It still blows my mind. The Bird guy is dating Tony Braxton. I wonder what kind of like church girl issues she has. Anyways, I shouldn't distract myself too much. But seriously, Tony Braxton for fucking Birdman's ridiculous. All right, I get it. Matt loves this song. So my good friend Luke Mayville, who is going to be on the show soon, who we're also going to actually be doing some calls with and some trainings with, is an academic. He wrote a really well-regarded book on John Adams and inequality that came out recently.
Oligarchy.
On oligarchy, that's right. Excuse me. He is the reason that that David Grisham is in this studio, in fact, because Luke taught this ne'er-do-well at American University and then pawned him off to me. He was like
Foisted.
Yeah, he foisted. He curved me. He totally foisted me. He's like, I know this kid. He real likes Bernie Sanders. You want to, yep. Delete my number. So anyways, Luke, in addition to being an academic, is the co-founder of a group called Reclaim Idaho, which is a grassroots effort that started in 2017. They basically organized a door-to-door grassroots campaign to save funding for a local school. They're literally doing bottom-up successful organizing in one of the most conservative places in the United States. And now they are pushing for Medicaid expansion, which is nothing could be both more important, obviously, for human needs and also politically potent for destroying the right. And here's Luke Mayville in our shout out. We're going to play a clip of him, Reclaim Idaho. He's going to talk about Reclaim Idaho's accomplishments and getting Medicaid for everyone that needs it in the great state of Idaho.
Hi, everyone. I'm Luke Mayville with the Medicaid for Idaho campaign, and tonight I have very good news. For 4 long, difficult years, our Idaho legislators have refused to expand Medicaid. That means that for 4 years, we've been sending federal tax dollars to fund programs in other states, while our Idaho legislators have failed to bring that money back into Idaho. And those are tax dollars that could have saved rural hospitals from closure all across the state, could have created 14,000 new jobs, and could have extended quality, affordable health care to 78,000 Idahoans who desperately need it. Here's the good news. Tonight, for the first time ever, you can visit MedicaidForIdaho.org and you can download a petition. You can print out a petition to put Medicaid expansion on the ballot, to give Idaho voters an opportunity to do something that Idaho's legislature has refused to do.
I could not be more proud of my friend Luke. Healthcare is an incredibly potent issue. It's a real issue. There's no contradiction. All forms of emancipation and justice are vital, connected, and interlocked. But the tip of the spear for us has got to be in that basic zone of survival and combat. It's disgusting that not everybody has health care. It's disgusting that we're defined by this kind of inequality. That's how we win the fight. If you're new to the show, Right-Wing Mandela is a character that has many sort of parents. Many, many years ago, Dave Chappelle did a sketch called Nelson Mandela Boot Camp, where he wore a Mandela shirt and a wig and beat on kids and called them. He was like, "You little bitch, it's a full Nelson." And he got them in headlocks. A couple years ago, more relevant in the real proper founding of Right-Wing Mandela, we heard a clip of Rick Santorum claim that fighting Obamacare was the moral equivalent of what Mandela was doing in fighting apartheid. And I sat there and I went, well, Rick is quite right. And ever since then, it's been a character. I want to just read something, though, that I did not know. This is an amazing book. It's called Shades of Difference. And it's written by Parag O'Malley, who I know. He's a great Irish journalist. I've interviewed him a couple times. He writes on conflict. And it's a bio of a guy named Mac Maharaj, fascinating guy who was a kind of upper-level African National Congress military operative and revolutionary, and then served in several governments, including the Zuma government. Mandela wrote the foreword to this book, and this foreword is very, very different than most Mandela forewords because he had a different type of relationship with Mac. He was kind of like a mentor to him. There was rivalry. There was ribbing. It's not just a kind of usual, like, sort of like, he was a great asset in the struggle. Thank you, read the book. It's a long, serious, and actually a kind of fascinating window into the more broad contours of just sort of the kind of what a fascinating, brilliant person Mandela was. But I do want to say here, and I have said, and other people have said, not just me, but first and foremost me, myself, that my comedy is psychic. One of the jokes I used to do was when Josh, a friend of mine and the show used to call, I used to say, "Josh, how was your mom?" As in Right-Wing Mandela calling out Josh's mom. This is a story. I have to pick it up in the middle of it because I don't have time to read the whole thing. But this is a verbatim quote from Mandela. He and Mac Maharaj were in Robben Island together. Mac Maharaj served time in the same prison that Mandela was in. And this is after Mac Maharaj's mother had just visited him. And I'm going to take it from there. This is Mandela now. When he returned from the cells that afternoon, I bumped into Mac and asked him how my girlfriend was doing. That is how I jocularly referred to Mac's mother. That is a verbatim quote from the real Nelson Mandela that made my day. It made my week. And it's a great book. We have some found audio from the other Nelson Mandela from his radio show that we're going to play before we get to the Patreon pitch and Nathan Robinson right now. All right. Okay, all right, everybody. Cut it. Cut the music. Mandela show. Okay, we need to address this. I never lie to the audience. This isn't fake news. It's not the globe emoji news. It's real news. I don't lie to you. Last week was a setback. And I say it that way for a reason. Because Mike Cernovich, who's a total freelancer, he's a loser, talks about the guerrilla mindset. I was in the guerrilla mindset when he couldn't even do date rape years ago. This guy's a nothing. He's a Twitter lisp who is totally freelance. He went after Samantha Rachel Cedar, prominent Jew, someone who, if you are creating a storyboard of ultimate liberal wussbag nuisance, you would literally create Sam's image. I've been on Samantha's show a few times, and by the way, if he ever talked to me the way he talked to Mike Cernovich, I would drop him. I would lay him out. And he's a nice guy. He got fired from MSNBC because of this tweet, which was a nothing tweet. Liberals apologize. Liberals do rape all the time. Mike Cernovich finds the one thing that's nothing. And now we are humiliated. It was a major loss this week. We need to disassociate from Weird Mike. I mean, it's Weird Mike. That's his name. Total freak weirdo. Gorilla mindset. More like mentally disabled wannabe bonobo mindset. Cut bait. Alex cut bait. Time to move forward. We'll be back. We'll get them. They're on the run. Mike Cernovich is a plant. More soon on Mandela Show. Wow. I had no idea how much Mike Cernovich's fuck up had traveled. Sad. I mean, it's Weird Mike. It's true. It's Weird Mike.
Weird Mike's letting the team down.
Weird Mike. Oh, Weird Mike. Now he's dragging his wife on camera. Very weird. Very weird stuff.
Weird Mike is really replacement level fascist talent.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see Weird Mike as irreplaceable. I'm sure I could get somebody to do the same thing without a weird voice. Sad.
Looks like a Ryan Gosling that went bad.
Yeah. I guess if Ryan Gosling got bloated, fucked up, had some type of weird charge in college, lisp, and was sort of like a weird parallel unattractive
Huffed
version.
paint.
Huffed paint. Couldn't pass the bar. Sad. I guess every part of that's true except for huffed paint. It's the only thing we don't know. But though God knows what's in that pills that schmuck is taking in those videos. I actually get worried about him when I see those things. I'm like, dude, stop ingesting yourself. You fucking moron. Okay. Patrons, we are moving. We hit, I believe, 870 today. We obviously, our next stretch goal is 900, and then we get another match from a patron who's going to hit us with a little sort of re-up, essentially a little bit of a bigger dose at 1,000. Yes, this is definitely a dog pound pitch. Absolutely. No, it's perfect. Keep playing. I'm into it. It's not instrumental. You're trying to sabotage the show. Dude, Snoop Dogg talking about Dr. Dre's testicles being an Eazy-E's mouth, rather, is not how we pitch the show. If you need a style guide. It's putting Dre Day underneath my patron pitch to my dear patrons. No, but seriously, the instrumental is great. Okay, we're back on safe ground here. I'm waiting for the lyrics to drop. Anyways, look, we are not able to do this without you. We are free of oligarch overlords. We can fight back and win against fascists. We can create all of the content you need to offend whoever we want to offend. And more importantly, build an entertaining, rigorous, innovative, and just powerful platform for this new left vanguard, this future we need to create. We're playing some role in it, and your funding allows us to do that. Plus, you get a ton of extra content. I'll explain it to you more in depth again next week. But for now, please just go to patreon.com/TMBS, patreon.com/TMBS. If you have any questions about the new Patreon change or anything like that, just let me know. Reach out to me on Twitter, message me on Patreon. But for now, that is where we are. That's how we get you to content, and it's how we keep moving and building this out. We are closing in on that 1,000, and then we're going to do animations, and we're going to get to another level of stability and security as we grow out this enterprise. Thank each and every one of you so much. We will be right back with Nathan Robinson on The Michael Brooks Show. Brooks Show. Joining us now is Nathan Robinson. He's the founder of Current Affairs. Nathan, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm great. Thanks, Michael. Good to be with you.
It's a great pleasure to have you. I've really long admired your writing. And tonight we need to talk about a sophistry. We need to talk about pseudo-intellectualism. And of course, I'm talking about Ben Schapiro. Before, actually, let's start really basic. What has made you turn your attention to Ben Schapiro? Why is he relevant for the left to dissect right now?
Well, the specific. So I just read this long article, as you say, kind of dissecting his work, if you want to call it his work.
Not really.
And the specific impetus for that was a New York Times profile of him, which called him, the rock star of young conservatives, and he's going around to various campuses and said, every young conservative knows who he is, and he's kind of seen as this intellectual, and it praised his ability. And the New York Times had all these things about how he dismantles left-wing arguments in ways that make it feel like he's just so logical. And so the profile was the specific catalyst for me exploring his work. But also, I've thought for a long time that when we have these figures on the right that are taken very seriously by their fans, we on the left kind of have a duty to, if we want to dismiss them, if we want to say, oh, they're full of crap, you don't need to listen to them, you have to present the case for that in a very clear and detailed manner. If you're going to write somebody off, if you're going to dismiss them or trivialize them, you can't do it unless you've proved your case. And so he in particular I dealt with because according to the article at least, he's taken very seriously and seen as like an intellectual heavyweight. Well, I don't see him that way, so but if I don't see him that way, I need to explain to people why I don't see him that way.
So make the case, and then we'll kind of move to the larger implications. But Ben Schapiro is, and it's part of a specific. I would say it's a specific media cycle. It's a specific type of content which is very popular on the new right, or the tech right, or whatever we want to call it. Not necessarily even specifically the alt right, but a specific younger conservatives playing in the platforms we're playing on. A lot of it actually goes back to, and I have very rigorous criticisms of him, although I think, frankly, none of these people hold a candle to him. But the sort of origin of this type of video and this type of character art, to me, it sort of goes back to the Christopher Hitchens. There's the kind of Hitchens, watch Hitchens own fill in the blank. Hitchens destroys fill in the blank. And then we go through, on one end, we have the new atheist sort of thing, which I think overlaps with this, because I think there's also the sort of similar kind of one-dimensional ahistorical nerdism at work, and then the more kind of overtly far-right figures like Ben Schapiro. But in all of this, these people are really idealizing a certain type of kind of glib verbal gymnastics, very, very narrow sort of legalistic arguments. And I don't mean that in terms of forensic insight. I mean that in terms of like picking incredibly narrow, petty sort of factoids to build narratives around. And then a certain kind of like debate team kind of like, facts don't care about your feelings. Like, this appeals to a certain kind of type. And I think we need to understand the emotional tenor of it, in terms of what people actually find appealing about it. So maybe we could kind of include that in the critique. But I guess let's just start with okay, let's take it at face value. I guess we live in a world where we actually have to take care of dismantling Ben Schapiro. What's the case?
Well, so the way I started with it was to take him seriously on his own terms, to say, what is the case he is making, right? And the case he is making is largely that the left doesn't take the left uses bullying tactics to disguise the fact that leftist arguments are sloppy. Mm-hmm. They're unwilling to deal with real facts. And if you present real facts and logic, you would find that right-wing views are the ones that are grounded in factual reality and basic reasoning, and that left-wing views aren't. And the only reason that people think that left-wing views are is because there are all these silencing tactics.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to go through and say, okay, all right. This is the argument you're making, is that if we looked at logic and facts, we would see that you're right. And he said, and he makes a rhetorical claim, which is, I am an honest broker. I am the one who cares about getting to the truth, right? My opponents don't care about the truth. I care about facts. I don't care about emotions. I'm just about facts. And so he suggested, and so I wanted to see whether that was true. And of course, it isn't true, right? You can see when you start to go through the kinds of arguments he makes, what you can see is that it's a very selective presentation of the facts. Sometimes the facts are just wrong. So, when he talks about transgender people, he'll cite a study that doesn't actually say what he says it says, right? So he'll say there's no evidence whatsoever that that if you misgender transgender people or don't accept transgender people, that it has a negative effect on them. No evidence whatsoever. And here's a study to support that. And then you go and look up the study, and you read the study carefully, and you find that actually the study says very clearly that when transgender people suffer bullying and harassment and aren't accepted by their families, that they're more likely to commit suicide or attempt to commit suicide. So that's a massive, serious discrepancy. And I think you can see, and I go through a ton of examples. I go through some of his claims about race, where he attributes the racial wealth gap entirely to culture, attributes black incarceration rates entirely to different crime rates. He doesn't care about facts because he doesn't deal with the facts that challenge that view. So,
I guess that's what I mean by the narrow
incarceration-
factoid legalism. Like, that's what I mean. It's like if you can find, and I guess that's what I want to be very specific about. And I want you to keep going, but I just want to lay a marker here because this includes, and I've had run-ins, especially on this platform. If you ever, criticize Sam Harris as an example, I mean, including people who, I appreciate obviously their support and they like both me and him. But there's plenty of people who are just, his cult members. And what will happen is you can do a presentation where, as an example, you'll show Ben Schapiro is reading a study on transgenderism incorrectly, or Ben Schapiro is, taking a random stat about the crime rate and ascribing a meaning and narrative to it, which in a social, historical, economic, and just sort of complete vacuum, I guess might signify something, but outside of it doesn't. Same thing with a Sam Harris. It's like, well, this Quran quote is bad. Therefore, all exercises in human endeavor to understand how the world works about vitally important subjects are invalid. They're unnecessary. We have the factoid. And so, to me, it pivots in between these very interesting contradictions and that actually create a real opening for this kind of thinking. And let me try to explain it. Left positions, if we're going to, let's say there's three categories. Left positions in some ways are the simplest and the most basic, because if you're on the left, you'd think that if you're kind of like grown-up adult with a sort of properly developed moral sensibility, you would have what people deem to be left positions. You'd want everybody to have health care, you'd oppose racism, you'd be concerned about civilian casualties, and so on, right? Then conservatives come in this sort of middle lane, and they complicate those things with nerdism. Like, well, wait a second. Well, maybe if everybody has healthcare, then the healthcare system isn't as good. Or, maybe in an unregulated free market where companies can do whatever they want, somehow magically that'll create the best outcomes. And here's some, books that say that. And then on the other hand, though, then the left can kind of come to a third level where we can sort of do much more sort of rigorous, historically grounded analysis, of which is much more hard to explain to the public, and I don't think people, and doesn't lend itself to some of the same kind of like watch, Sam Harris destroy some silly rabbi or something in 5 minutes. So I think we're put into that kind of quandary because some of it should be self-evident and other things are actually much more complicated, and they're playing in this middle ground. Go ahead.
I used the transgender example because of this, because this is a thing where he has videos of him on YouTube owning people, whatever it is, on transgender issues by just going, well, I think a man's a man and a woman's a woman. That's not true. Do you say that's not true? Do you say that black is white and up is down and A is B and B is A, right? And then the person just goes, no, it's different. And then he goes, it's different. How's it different? And then he doesn't give them a chance to try and think it through.
Right.
But actually, it takes some thinking. It actually, to understand what the argument being made by transgender people is, it's nuanced.
Right.
And this idea of sex and gender kind of being different things, how we conceive of gender, why we put people into certain categories, what the markers are. I mean, these came through sort of the development of our theories about how the world works. And they're kind of complicated, and you have to spend some time thinking, and then eventually you go, oh, that does seem right. It's true that a lot of the things that mark gender are not chromosome-based, they're kind of socially based. And that is something that you just can't get in a discussion where a talking head shouting discussion where I'm saying, well, men are men, and you're saying they're not, right? These are things that are not really, you're not really capable of even conveying points. If the discussion is going to be you take 10 seconds, I take 10 seconds, I can never win that discussion if I have like a three-part argument where I go, well, look, if you admit this and you admit that, then this. Let's think about it. So the structure of how TV punditry works, and he kind of comes out of TV punditry, means that he is already at an advantage because talking points win, and if your thing doesn't boil down to an easy talking point, it's just going to lose.
And so then to me, it's like that, and this is where I think your enterprise could not be more important. And we do need to, and I actually, when I read you, I sort of, sometimes I kind of metaphorically slap my own hands, right? Because I'm like, there definitely I'm a polemicist. I believe in satire and mockery. And I also frankly believe in dismissing a lot of people because of their funding sources and because of the sort of transparent nature of what they're doing. But at the same time, clearly these ideas have traction. They have capital. They have cultural movement. We need to address them at their own terms. But by the same token, I think that the whole matrix you just described explained how fundamentally skewed the whole incentive structure is, where we could even get to the point of just the notion of Ben Shapiro being considered some type of intellect is a pure reflection of like, there's a right-wing donor base that subsidizes this type of punditry. There's media training apparatus that trains you how to be good on TV. And then there's a social media marketing and hit system which elevates you. So when we're talking about someone like Ben Shapiro, we're talking about purely just a kind of pundit market creation. But because media is so credulous and those categories have been so blurred, all of a sudden we're talking about a thinker, but we're really not.
Yeah, if you spend more than a few seconds reading his writing and you actually think about what the arguments are, and I've gone through like 20 of his arguments in the piece, and you actually think about what some of them are, some of them don't even make any sense.
You give a good example.
So like he says he said atheism is incompatible with the idea of free will, and the argument that he gave was, he said, well, because God endows people with free will, therefore if you're an atheist you can't believe in free will. Well, that makes no sense, right? Because he's just assuming the conclusion. He's saying, well, my religious beliefs say that God endows people with free will, and so therefore atheists can't possibly believe in free will. But there are plenty of atheists who believe in free will, and there's no actual. He hasn't actually shown you any reason why those two things contradict each other. What he's actually said is, I don't believe that. Well, that's not an argument, right? He says he makes arguments, but really what he's doing is just saying what he believes.
Right.
But he says these things very, very confidently, often very quickly, and you have to think about it for a second and go, hang on a minute, what you just said, that didn't prove the point. That didn't make any sense. He had one about pornography where he says, well, if pornography is legal, why can't we murder homeless people? Why can't we murder homeless? He said because
he would get an erection doing that? I'm trying to follow.
No, he said it's because legal pornography comes from the idea that if something doesn't harm me, it should be okay. And, well, you murdering a homeless person wouldn't harm me. So the same logic would apply. Well, of course, the same logic wouldn't apply because it would harm the homeless person. The entire point is that it's not about you, right?
Right.
So, and there's a massive difference between murdering someone and, having sex on video, right? There's just a difference. And there are meaningful philosophical differences that you have to deal with. But he just says things.
Yeah, but I've seen Sam Harris reduce down the civilian casualties, and oh my God, I shouldn't have used this example because I know I'm going to get a million. You took it out of context, but whatever. There was a comparison that he drew, and sort of minimizing the civilian casualties of drone strikes with speed limits, and the point being that there's both side effects of both, but we don't ban one. That's a grotesque and in fact, not only moral, but yes, philosophical category error. But again, in this era of the factoid argument masquerading as ironclad logic, that travels the internet pathways.
He loves that speed limits thing. He used that as well in when he was justifying Palestinian civilian casualties of the Israeli occupation. He's like, well, he just uses it to justify anything. He goes, well, if we didn't think people could die, then why wouldn't we set the speed limit at 15 miles an hour so no one would die in a car crash? And you're like, no, we're saying that these particular deaths are neither necessary or nor justified. He uses that all the time, as if just saying that is a knockdown argument, and then he's proved you wrong, and then what are you going to say? You've been owned, and once you're owned, well, there's nothing more for you to do. Go away. Yeah, I just that's the point on stage where I go, you know what? The fucking speed limits. We should totally drop white phosphorus on Gaza. Sorry for wasting your time. So then if we know, I guess is this the sort of, as we sort of, and I want to have you on again soon to talk about Charles Murray as well, who actually, as sort of contemptible as he is, it feels weird to say this. Compared to Ben Schapiro, at least there's some, horrible, in my view, sort of overtly bigoted books, but at least actual books written. But that being said, if we know that these are sort of silly kind of, just sort of sophistry, basically, but the incentive structure of both right-wing funding, punditry, and social media sort of algorithms incentivizes it, and that we're never going to be playing on an equal playing field with either very, very, very basic, in fact, and I would argue there's nothing wrong with this, feeling-based moral sentiment, or on the other hand, actual analytic rigor that has to take a couple of minutes to explain that flying killer robots as part of a questionable foreign policy is distinct in setting speed limit levels, then we're going to be at a structural disadvantage. What's your instinct for an answer to that? Yeah. Yeah, right. Like the nature of left versus right is the nature of of structural disadvantage versus people. Right. So you obviously are at a disadvantage. But here's what the part of this where I'm critical of the left is that I think you still have to do the work of, unfortunately, it's a pain, but you have to go through and you do, if a lot of people are going, wow, that Ben Schapiro, he seems really smart, he really gets the better of everyone he meets, you really do have to spend the time going through and saying, okay, well, look, you may not read it, but I have responded to this.
Right.
And I think too often the instinct of the left is to say, okay, well, look, they're vacuous, they are corporate funded, why would we bother engaging with their argument? The problem is that actually gives them kind of a weapon, because then one major part of their pitch is, well, look, they won't even respond to my arguments. This is what Charles Meyer says all the time. He goes, well, if they think I'm so wrong, why do they never prove me wrong? Why do they never? And so I think you have to go, if people are buying it and these people have fans, you have to go through and you have to say, okay, look, I will respond to your arguments. This isn't about the fact that I'm unwilling to respond to your arguments. I don't have responses. This is and you have to prove, as I say, prove the case that they're not worth listening to before you can convince people that they're not worth listening to. And so that's what I've kind of been trying to do with Murray and then with Shapiro, is kind of take them seriously. And in fact, I think it's working a little bit, because I've gotten a couple of emails after that Shapiro article from people who said either they had liked Shapiro and now they kind of don't like him anymore because they see what I was saying, or they showed the article to a friend who liked him, and one person said their friend has now sworn off him.
We got that. I think we actually got that in a tweet in response to promoting this show. In fact, the same story, the same angle. So what I'd like to do, Nathan, is I'd like to have you on again fairly soon, and we'll do Take Them at Their Word series, where we will eviscerate all in a way where facts will not care about their feelings. And we will reduce down to size all of these figures on the far right, and I would hope we can. That would be great. I think the left should welcome debate. If we're confident in our positions, we should say, okay, look, bring on the facts. Let's have a serious discussion about the facts, because the facts are on my side. So I don't need to shy away from debate. Yeah, look, as I've always said to people in the sort of campus debate controversy, and there's many aspects of it, but when it comes to Ben Shapiro specifically, I have to say, if that little guy keeps you in bed, then you shouldn't be in the game to begin with. These are certainly people that we can deal with, intellectually and analytically. Nathan Robinson, he's the founder and editor of Current Affairs. It's the Cool Kids Philosopher. It's an essential piece on Ben Shapiro. In a couple of weeks, we'll hopefully have you on again, and we will talk about Charles Murray. And then at some point, I would like to get to my arch nemesis, the hysterical man who speaks calmly himself, Sam Harris. Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks, Mike. Thank you, Nathan. Take care. Okay. We're going to get to Dick Coughlan. We're going to do this pyramid segment. Let's play DJ. So DJ Danerkey put together a new track. It's the new beat that we have. And this isn't going to be the one that we use for the show. This is going to be, it's sort of Shapiro specific theme. Is there any way, you need headphones, right? Oh yeah, we can get. And may I have a beer? Yeah, you can. Thank you. It's the Shapiro test, right? It should be the Shapiro test. Let's play that, and then we'll get everybody set up and get Dick Coughlan on the phone. Dick Coughlan is a iconic alt-right YouTube satirist. He's a really funny guy, and he's also British. It's like
he's not alt-right. He's satirizing.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah, no, he's on the left. He's like an original good guy who's been destroying these folks. He's like Mike Cernovich. No, I'm just kidding. We'll be back shortly. We're going to talk about Dave Rubin, throw him in the pyramid, and then Alyona Minkovski will join us in studio. Thanks, man. Ooh. 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 I really think that if Gandhi was alive today, Danarchy. What do you think?
I'm a fan.
I'm a big fan of that. I especially like the I love that moment when she threatened to beat up Ben Schapiro. Yeah, I also like how it subtly contradicts everything that Nathan Robinson just advocated doing. But, that's the dialectic. This is a Marxist show. Joining us now is a guy that I've known, at least in the social media sphere, for years. A very, very funny guy. He's a pioneering YouTuber. He's a satirist, comedian. He's also been blocked by many advocates of an open and free exchange of ideas. Dick Coughlan, how you doing, brother?
Hello, sir. How are you? I'm very well, thank you.
It's great to be talking with you, man. I'm actually kind of amazed.
My block list on Twitter is one of my proudest achievements. I think I shared it on on Twitter just recently. It was up to about 15, 16. No, I had to set up a second Twitter just so I can see these people's tweets and respond to them now.
How did you? Because you've been in this game for a while. I mean, I think I remember because you were doing stuff where you were satirizing like this sort of like the whole sad like gaming men's rights thing. How did these people become comedy for you, and what is it like to see them take control of the White House and the world?
It became comedy for me. I've always been. I thought it was. First of all, I'd say thank you for the grandiose introduction of iconic. I always think it's quite amusing whenever I've done interviews and stuff, and I'm introduced as this is Dick Coughlan. He's a famous iconic comedian, and everyone in the comments is like, "Oh, I've never heard of him. But who's this?" I'm like, "That's how famous I am." You have to. So, but yeah,
we're Deepak Chopraing it, man. We're manifesting it into reality.
Exactly. Yeah. It's ironic fame.
Yes.
But the reason is I've always been like fascinated by the extremes of society in general. When I started, when I was 19, I was training to be an actor. And you've seen my videos, you've seen what I look like, and I don't know if my appearance has had a role in this, but for some reason, every time I did an acting job, I always ended up getting cast as either a drug addict, a homeless person, or a serial killer. And this is all I've ever ended up playing. If there was an agency that dealt with just someone who could play those three types of roles,
I'd
be their number one client. Yeah, I'm serious. I the first three acting jobs I ever did, I was a serial killer, and I ended up. I'm a bit of a method actor, so I always sort of took things very. I didn't go out and kill people, obviously.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'd be careful what you admit on the show.
But I mean,
I do have a lot of people watching me, Dick. So
yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
Yeah.
Your stock has gone right down. Now I'm talking to you.
Yeah. That's the new Mike. So Sam Theater's associate with his own show had the guy on. He's admitted to being a serial killer. Mike Cernovich. Breaking news.
It would be about right, but yeah. But I mean, I ended up sort of like getting fascinated by these kinds of extremes, and then I got sort of like into the religious debate. I've always sort of been. I've never been religious, and when I sort of came onto YouTube, it was at the start when being an atheist was the kind of thing that was like the sort of rising movement, and I sort of did it. And I didn't really come on here to come on YouTube to talk about religious people. I came on to talk about nutters because I'm just fascinated by different types of nutters people who just have these bizarre beliefs that make you go, no one can. This can't truly be real. And as far as the politics
so that led you to the right wing.
Yeah, exactly. Which led me to towards the far right. Now, as far as politics go, I mean, the far right. I was when I was younger. I remember seeing a documentary about the British National Party, and just when they were sort of like this was when they were still bordering on irrelevance. But what was fascinating to me, the point where it all became really fascinating, was in 2004, when the British National Party, who went from being a political party of complete irrelevance, with like barely getting 1,000 votes in the last election, to suddenly getting 2.5 million votes and getting a seat in the European Parliament. And the way they did this was purely genius, and I've described this as, in my opinion, this sums up how easily susceptible and weak human beings' minds are. And what they did was the British National Party, whose manifesto has not changed since its inception. It's the same. It's black people, immigrants, Jews, all this other stuff. All they did in 2004, they brought out the same manifesto, identical advancement. They just took out the word immigration and they changed it to Islamification.
Right.
And they took out all the references to black people. They didn't mention race once. They didn't talk about Pakistanis or Indians. They just said Muslims.
Right.
And they didn't talk about race. They talked about Islam. That was the only single difference that you saw. And they went from being this party of just Holocaust denying Nazis who were a joke to being this, suddenly they're this political force. And then
No, sorry, finish your thought. Then I had a question.
No, I mean, that sort of led to the rise of parties like UKIP, and then and in fact, the most interesting thing, I've mentioned this recently, is if you look at their 2004-2005 manifesto, it is almost identical to the UKIP 2010 manifesto. And the interesting thing about that is
United UK Independence Party. Right.
Yes, the Nigel Farage's party. Well, it was Nigel Farage's party. But what's interesting is that the 2010 UKIP manifesto is almost identical to the Tory party's 2015 manifesto. So if you want a sort of really simple way to show the trajectory of how far to the right politics has gone, it's right there. It's there in these three simple steps of going BNP, UKIP to Conservative in 10 years.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly it. That's like a perfect blueprint right there. Did you find it interesting? Because I notice all the time, like with the religion thing. So for me, like, and this is just a genuine viewpoint, and I guess my sort of genuine bottom line with religion is I truly don't care, and I think I would care more if. Look, I get if people have grown up in an environment where they were abused because of their religious upbringing, and whether that be Christian or Muslim or Jewish or whatever, that is a very serious thing. I don't in any way minimize that. I completely understand and know people whose liberating themselves from an abusive religious background was a major part of their lives. So I just kind of want to table that and put that in its own lane. But besides that, I mean, I've always been agnostic essentially in my beliefs. I do have a form of a spiritual life, and I totally think that religion is a completely malleable, hackable thing. And, any one thing that is represented by Senegalese Sufis and, Salafist terrorists. I mean, sure, it's connected, but these are radically different phenomenon, just as Desmond Tutu is one of my heroes and Pat Robertson's a great villain. On top of that, it's much more valuable to figure out everything, in my view, from a material perspective that just is going to get you to a more sophisticated understanding of how everything works. But was it weird? I just noticed the conflation when I started talking about this stuff. You would say, hey, or I would say, I think categorical bigoted statements about Muslims is both sort of factually wrong, and it's kind of stupid, and it is in fact bigoted, even if we're playing games about it's not a race, it's a religion, blah blah blah. And then on top of it, and then certain foreign policy things are wrong, and so on. And then that would become this oh well, you're a Muslim apologist, and you just want the Muslims to move here and build a mosque and build a minaret outside your window, and all of this kind of hysterical nonsense from otherwise people who would totally identify as liberal and not like Roy Moore types. I mean, and of course you're I never for a second. I mean, my views on religion and public life are really obvious, which is that I don't want religion to set policy, right? So, but did you find it bizarre how religion started to get conflated with, people just have an inability to talk and have any type of actual understanding of anything?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, Islamophile was one that I occasionally get called, which I always think is funny. I have been accused multiple times of being a secret Muslim.
Oh, me too.
Allahu Akbar. Well, yeah, I've actually got the trifecta. There's three that they call this. I'm a secret Muslim, closet Christian, or crypto Jew is my favorite one. And for some bizarre reason, it's always those three. It's always It's always secret. It's never secret Jew. It's crypto Jew. It's specifically. It's a condition. I don't know whether there's a pill for it or whatever.
You're not a crypto Jew.
No, no, unfortunately not. No. Well, I mean,
get off the show, Matt. Can we cut his feed?
Oh, typical East Coast liberals. But the thing is that the interesting thing was when I learned about. I've done a lot of videos, obviously, about Nazis and talking about. I've done lots of videos about the Holocaust and Holocaust denial and such. And I always tell people that if you want to understand what's happening in the world in regards to what you said with conflating certain things to a point where you can't get to a conversation like the conflation of Islam with race and stuff is exactly what's always been the case. I mean, I've got newspaper cuttings and stuff from the 1930s where you'll literally see Nazis making the same. Oh, look, Jews aren't a race. This isn't a racial issue. They're Jews of a religious group, and there's the Daily Mail. A newspaper headline I've got, which is talking about the hordes of Jewish immigrants coming over from, and if you read it, it's like this is an article from the Daily Mail. It's not a racial. We're talking about culture. Why can't we have a free exchange of ideas? I genuinely think it wouldn't be difficult for them to create like an algorithm program where you just type in minority or oppressed group, the name for that bigotry, and then it would create these articles for it.
Well, I think what you're doing there though is you're showing a historical awareness which none of these people possess. But we have like a minute or so left, and I want to just talk to, because this is a lead up, and we'll have you on again. Obviously, we'll do more on both platforms, but. Dave Rubin is sort of like who I'm sure has blocked you on Twitter.
Definitely blocked me. Yes, he blocked me after the Slate article called him right wing, and he suddenly
Mother Jones called him right wing, and he threatened to sue them. Because he's one of those people who likes to conveniently bring up that he's gay and Jewish when it's convenient to him, and he's like I've had family members who have fought against literal Nazis, and my reply to him was, well, don't let your mother into your comment section on YouTube, and then that's when he blocked me. Yeah, exactly. And also, and he takes, there's connections to the Koch brothers. I mean, this guy, I think the reason he sticks with me is I have never seen anybody, like I see in media, you see craven people all the time. You see a fair amount of stupid people. I have never seen anybody at the perfect platonic convergence of both genuinely craven and genuinely stupid as Dave Rubin. Like, it blows my mind. I mean, he's genuinely not a bright person, which I'm going to need to set aside how not bright he is, because we're going to need to more thoroughly debunk him before he comes out and does whatever Tory does with this. Well,
he's going to bring up the fact that it's Hanukkah, and we're doing a video about him now. He's going to bring something up about the pyramids and the fact that the Jews were persecuted in Egypt, and he'll tie that to this somehow. That'll be the way.
Or he'll be like, "Oh, they're doing pyramid. Isn't that cultural appropriation?" Yeah.
Exactly.
He is like sort of like somebody. I mean, and also, by the way, if you ever want to feel a sense of humanity or empathy with Dave Rubin, attempt to watch him do stand-up. It's one of then you'll forgive everything that he's done in his career.
He does. He can stand up. The standing up is great. I've never seen a man stand up easier in my life. It's the comedy part that he struggled with.
Yeah,
it's the comedian part.
And there's this whole clip. It's actually funny. The only clip I've ever seen of him is literally him standing in front of a sort of like morose crowd being like, "Any gay people out tonight?" And I'm sitting there like, "Why are you playing identity politics? The hell is your problem?" So, but dude, okay. And he sits there and he has he's sort of, I guess it's like the Larry King approach to interviewing the worst people on the planet. Yeah. Sort of like, "Oh, so you think that IQ means that black people are prone to incest? Why do you think liberals are so upset about what you're saying? Oh, you think that Muslims are all like inbred people from Arabia and we need to ban them from the country? And I guess college students can't take a joke. I'll take more Patreon money,
his defense is to straw man his own position, and then to sort of it's a bizarre sort of sort of way of doing it. But it works for him. I mean, he has Sam Harris, who he had on the show. I mean, Sam Harris is the original kind of fake classical liberal. I remember reading articles about Sam Harris in 2006 to things like to my fellow liberals friends, and it's obviously about Islam or something like that. And Sam Harris is a lot smarter than Dave Rubin, so he's been able to get away with it.
This is
a lot
true.
more.
If ever there was a true statement, that was it. So look, we're gonna do more with Dave Rubin, but tonight we do need to sentence him to the pyramid. I'm sure he'll sneak out with some funding from the Koch brothers and aggrieved virgins on Patreon.
You can put it next to the rice that Ben Carson put in there.
Yeah, Ben Carson he'll sort of leverage himself out with a bag of rice that Ben Carson had stored. But Dave Rubin, and also, by the way, I just want to add, the reason I thought of Dave Rubin is because a guy who built his whole career off of like hyperventilating and giving himself panic attacks about like, I don't know, kids at Oberlin being stupid or something, and saying like, oh my God, free speech is over. Now, he is terrified of debating both me and Sam and you.
I have seen that, yes,
right?
yeah.
He will not respond to that because we heard his fifis, because I think I put out a video where I had some comments about his idea that Martin Luther King
It was the one where you mentioned me as well. It was the video you mentioned me, and I was like, oh, I got a shout out, I got a mention on this, and then it went down 6 hours later.
Oh, right, because the line was that you said that Dave Rubin was the Grenada of the War of Ideas.
Yes.
and that so Dave Rubin, the Grenada of the War of Ideas, had nothing to say about Sam's whole thing with Mike Cernovich, even though that was like literally the one thing that happened in mass culture that might support his entire purpose for all of his whining and hyperventilating. And that is why, along with my friend Dick Coughlan, who everybody needs to check out and will be on the show again soon, we are sentencing, along with our friends from the Institute for Progressive Momentics, we are sentencing Dave Rubin and his profoundly, deeply unfunny self to the pyramid.
Oh, you're a funny crowd.
Dave Rubin in his element. As soon as you watch him do stand-up, all else is forgiven. Dick Coughlan, well, that's not true. We're going to have to beat up on him a lot more. Dick Coughlan, check him out. There's going to be links to your Twitter, your YouTube, everything else. I look forward to talking with you again soon, my paisan.
You too, sir. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. All right, everybody. Alyona Minkovski has entered the building. See, I know how to pronounce it now that I do a Polish accent on it. Minkovski. Well, you'll say it right when you're up here. Would you like to come? Yeah, come sit. Well, we're gonna play one more sketch, but want to sketch.
Are you New
I'm
Zealand
just
now?
fucking up all.
I'm gonna
of
play
my,
a sketch.
We're gonna play a sketch for you. Well, I was thinking of Alona and I's mutual friend Josh Zepps. Josh Zepps. You're like, Allahu Akbar, Muslims. That's my Josh Zepps impression. She has headphones over there, right?
Yeah, but the push to talk.
Oh, yeah. Can you just flip it? Yeah.
I gotta head out.
Oh, watch out for her beer, though. Thanks, man. Okay, you're good. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so look, everybody, as you know, we've been chronicling on this show President Obama's new late night program and the relaunched WB. And for patrons, and I want to thank again everybody. Those numbers are coming real good. We do illicit histories every week. Just recorded one with Angela Nagel. We just did one with Anthony LaPaye on the Bolivian cartel connection that led to the growth of Iran-Contra. But we're going to be doing a new illicit history series that is going to be a little bit different, and it's in partnership with Barack Obama and his program on the WB. And we're going to play this ad for it, and then I'm going to come back with my friend and Michael Brooks Show crew, Alyona
Minkovski.
Alyona.
Minkovski.
Alyona.
Minkovski.
Minkovski.
Right.
Said it right. I did. I got it. All right. Sort of. All right. Let's check this out, and we will be right back. Welcome back to the Barack Obama Show on the relaunched WB. Pretty soon we'll be talking with Sinbad again. New stories about Harvey Weinstein. We got to defend these devils. Roy Moore. There's no law against devils defiling their own children. All that and more with Sinbad. But first, a big announcement. Many of you know that I put out the Audacity of Hope to soothe the deluded white man into a false sense of complacency. But now, as part of the next phase of the Kenyan griot plot to put me in the presidency and destroy the white race, it's time for me to release my true, full story. Every part of it. Where was I really born? Who was the communist, Muslim, gay, poet, terrorist who planted my fake announcement in the Hawaiian newspaper of my birthplace? All that is going to come out in a 4-part series in the real Barack Hussein again, baby, Obama story. We're putting it together. We're releasing it exclusively for black people on the relaunched WB in partnership with the Michael Brooks Show. So if you're a devil and you want to find out the real story, there's only one place you can find it. Apparently it's some type of illicit history. You can say that again. Listen and weep, white people. There's going to be no hope for you when you're done. It's time to tell the true story. It's going to be a 3-part, between 3 and 4-part series. It's coming soon. We really timed the suit well on the music. It is a big get. I've been working with Obama for a little while, and I've been really appreciative of how open he is about his real religious inclinations and his actual feelings about white people.
Amazing.
Do you sometimes think, like, we were talking about this earlier? Like, I talked about this a couple weeks on the show with Waz, and we're like, there's something so insane about, like. And this part isn't conscious, but like white people got together and they were like, the first black president happened. They were just like, oh, well, you know what? We're going to follow it up in such a way that achievement is not that impressive anymore. All right. Like anybody could do this. Like, you know, like Elon Musk said that didn't he say something like kind of annoying in like college dorm a couple weeks ago? Like, he thinks there's a high probability we're in a computer simulation or something like that. Some billionaire asshole
added to
nonsense.
The list of the annoying things.
Just like shut up, dude. You're a fucking glorified government contractor. I don't care.
Yeah, the chances are really only like 4%.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, R2D2 Matt Leck over there.
I think it shows the very deep contrast of where we can go in terms of leadership. You know, because on one hand, it felt like for a very long time we were slowly kind of working our way towards the idiocracy, version of our political reality, and we have now actually reached it.
We've arrived. But we're here.
Sure.
We've got it. But I was just thinking to myself, I thought and then I was thinking of like Roy Moore, because it's like that's another classic. Like, could you imagine like if Obama was like, and another thing, I was at a brothel once and I chose not to fuck some kids. And I always asked girls' mothers' permission before I had sex with them. And what's the other, like, Roy Moore shit? Like, just like, and I got a Jew lawyer, so I'm friends with them. Yeah. Fired up, ready to go. See you on Tuesday.
You can't have a Muslim in Congress because they have to swear on the Bible.
That's the only part I disagree with. I was 14. I asked her mom. I said, can she go community organizing with me? Wink, wink.
Oh, my goodness.
So when you think about the fact that these guys could elect like an almost definite pedophile whose buddy was like, I got a closing argument for you. We went to a brothel in Vietnam and chose not to fuck kids. And you think that Barack Obama, I am so much to the left of Obama. Like, I don't idealize him, but had to be like an exemplary person. Is reality just a giant simulation to fuck with black people? Like, is that what it is?
It's fucked up. You know, like everything that you just highlighted, which is that the standard had to be so high for what Barack Obama had to do in terms of, very much in his policy that I disagree with, but in terms of the kind of character and persona he was going to be and that his family was going to reflect as the representatives of the United States to the rest of the world. it's unfair. It's completely unfair, but it is in every single respect. But the Roy Moore stuff to me, you know, in the same way that Donald Trump and his election was a reaction to Barack Obama and his election, you know, the Roy Moore stuff is again just kind of unearthing a lot of really uncomfortable truths that always existed. You know, like to me, that story is a kind of conflagration of so much that's going on, which is that, you know, evangelical voters are total hypocrites and they don't actually care about real values anymore. They just want to elect somebody who's going to not allow people to get abortions and, you know, protect their religious freedom, which is the freedom to discriminate against other people based on what their religious beliefs are. You know, and in addition, the fact that people don't care if Roy Moore used to or still is, whatever, is a predator, especially towards young women, is also part of the weird, like, patriarchal nature of, you know, of
even
not just
as like
that
a very big brocialist
aspect.
who totally doesn't want to hear about women's shit anymore would acknowledge that.
But it's true. It's like, are you really surprised that people don't care? You know, like they don't give a shit about women. That's kind of been the norm and been the standard.
What I'm wondering though is like, because I feel like I was joking that like Mike Pence is Al Qaeda and Roy Moore is ISIS. Like, is there like there's like don't give a shit about women misogyny, which is rampant. This feels like, oh no, I give a shit because specifically I want to fuck with you. Like, you know what I mean? It feels like even more targeted and abused. Like it's not even just like disregard of humanity, like garden variety misogyny.
But
that apparently
part of like the fake news thing too, right? It's
right.
like, oh, you're going to tell us this is happening, and we're just not going to believe you. Or, oh, let's say that Roy Moore does get elected and then the, you know, Senate doesn't want him and there has to be another special election. There's going to be just as many like vindictive Alabama voters that come out and vote him in.
And you know that's not going to happen.
Again.
If he gets there, the whole thing's going to quiet down
course,
and he's going to vote for the tax giveaways, and that's what it all comes down to.
It's the only thing they care about. Did you see there was a little clip of an interview from Roy Moore where somebody was asking him about Dreamers, DACA, and he just had no idea what they were talking about.
Like, I don't like Mexican
he was like,
girls.
What are Dreamers?
I don't think Hispanic girls are hot. Why do I care?
But then he got pissed.
Yeah.
He was like, well, stop making fun of me. Like, tell me what it is. And it's like, you want to be in the Senate? And you have no idea what it is that you're going in to be, to be voting for.
That
a
lot
will
of balls
affect
on that
millions of
guy.
lives.
He's still getting angry. I like it. He's just like, yeah, I don't know what I'm talking about. Yeah, I'm a pedophile.
That's all he has left.
Fuck
is,
you all.
is anger.
Could you imagine if Barack Obama had like a friend who came out dressed in like a zoot suit and he was just like, man, we had the best plot of motherfucking Vietnam. And Barack was just like, this ain't right. Vote for him. I just can't stop running those scenarios. Like it's just unfucking real. That was because none of this, like I always thought, I was on your show. I actually remembered this recently. And I think I was on with like a panel that I don't remember who, but it definitely included some people who were like significantly more well-known than like I am now, and definitely than I was then. Right. And like, and they were all liberal or whatever, and everybody on the panel besides you, and that's just like true. They were all like, you know, oh well, you know, yeah, like we're all liberal, but you know, Trump just said this terrible thing, and I think Republican voters are going to just be really fed up with it. And I was like, no, he just said this terrible thing, and he's going to get another bump in the polls. And they got offended. Like I remember, it wasn't like a big fire.
You have a much better memory than I do.
You did it every day, and
it
wasn't like a big blowout. But I do remember one person being like, "You really have such a low opinion of Republican vote," and I was like, "Yeah, I do." Like I don't know what you guys are watching. Like, you think it's going to hurt him that he just racially insulted Mexicans and demeaned women? You think that isn't? I would say if I was a Republican strategist, like, nice.
I will say that I did think after the grab him by the pussy tape came out, like I thought that was a turning point in the election.
In the general, maybe.
At the time. I thought, no way after this audio leaked, especially given what the, 48% video did to Mitt Romney, which in retrospect is like so vanilla, in comparison.
I still think that's pretty evil.
Well, it is. But
It's
I'm just
mass
saying
dehumanization. It's the same thing.
Fine.
Yeah.
I did not mean to justify what Mitt Romney said.
No, but I understand what you're saying. It's not as visceral.
But I thought
yeah.
oh, well, this is that moment for Trump. And, and that was a real wake up call for me to remember no, this is the world that.
This is where, I wonder if Roy Moore at the video came out of like, can I grab your daughter by the pussy?
Jesus. Gee, horrible.
What do you? No, the point I was leading to though was like the reason I'm making these
but I
horrible jokes. Yeah, I asked, right? It was like, wait, you're 16? No, no, fuck that. Not that. I asked 14-year-olds mothers. You're 16. You're a woman of the world. That was the first thing I remember when Pollock from Breitbart came out, and the first day after it broke, and he literally was like, "Yeah, well, 14, sure, that's a little weird, but one of them was 16."
It's all okay,
that was like
then.
his whole spin was like, let's just go. And that to me was the first, like, I thought I had no shock factor with this stuff. And I guess I wasn't shocked by Roy Moore, but I was it made me sad.
It is sad.
It's just like, really?
I think we don't know how else to react to it and how else to deal with it, which is why you kind of have to like laugh and cringe, because it's deeply depressing that this is who we are as a country, that this is where we are as a country, and it's not like you can. I don't know how you convince other people to change their minds on these things, right? We're only increasingly becoming more tribal, more partisan, more siloed, and into our little ideological circles and bubbles. And so it's like people are just retreating from each other, and it's sad.
Don't you think though? I feel like it's beyond that. I mean, I think that like this is not like it's so funny that like even like there's no equivalent conversation on the right about like, oh, it's sad that we're in our bubbles. Like they're like, no, we're gonna fucking destroy you people. Like there is no analog to that. And I think when you look at, to me, it's like, it's one thing to say like, okay, and I don't think, political disagreements are pretty deep. I don't think they're just like, we have different sports teams, because I think, these are moral propositions. And in fact, like, I do judge you whether or not you believe in women's rights, as an example.
Yeah.
Whether or not you believe everybody else should have health care. Like, to me, that's not just like it's a disagreement. Those are pretty fundamental distinctions in how we're going to be in the world. But I just think with this stuff now, it's like, it's so purely reactive. Like, there's people that are going to vote for Roy Moore purely because it upsets people like us.
Mm-hmm.
And that
they're just to spite people.
And there is not an analog. Like, I'm not voting for Bernie Sanders to make some guy in Alabama upset. In fact, I even still want to give that fucking prick health care.
Yeah, but that guy in Alabama probably doesn't believe that. He
might not believe
he
it.
thinks
Yeah.
that what you believe is true and good and for it will work in the favor of humanity as a whole and of society as a whole. I'm sure that those people don't believe that, and they think that perhaps your views are nefarious and sinister and
without a doubt. But I mean, we still need to make these distinctions, right? Like, yeah, I mean, we all have different opinions, but one opinion is leading to voting for a pedophile.
Yes.
And one is not. So we don't have to have any false equivalency.
No, it's very, very true.
So you've been talking about, and I just wanted to run this by you because David just brought this to my attention before. But like, we're having some interesting conversations about how to cover race on your new show.
Mm-hmm.
And first of all, tell people, because I don't think you were doing your new show the last time you were in here.
I wasn't. No, yeah. So I'm working at Salon, and
Nice.
it's not necessarily like a show, because I do a couple different things there. We have a series called Salon Talks, where I do kind of long form interviews with, celebrities, authors, whoever.
You're trying to book Roy Moore?
I have not tried to book Roy Moore yet.
Yeah.
But we also do these kind of roundtable discussions. Tomorrow I'm actually doing one about Alabama
Right.
and the results of the election. And so one of them, we had Jamila King and, oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking on who else joined me. Jack Smith. So Jamila works for Mother Jones. Jack writes for Mike. And it was after the New York Times, wrote that article about the white nationalist, which a lot of people really took issue with because it was about like what good manners he had. And, like how normal he looked. And, basically, I think to a lot of people made it seem like they were normalizing and kind of legitimizing this guy's beliefs, only because I think that the reporter really failed to kind of put it into context. There's many ways to write a story like that. And so part of what our discussion was with Jamila and Jack was that you can make the focus the people who are affected, by his views. Right. His family members, other people who know him more personally and intimately who can kind of chime in and talk about, the damage that it does. Or you can write about him, but really put it into the context of, largely what's happening in the country. And this just kind of seemed to me like this weird standalone profile where without any of that, you would just think like, oh, here's this really totally normal guy. And I wonder, why he hates black people and Jewish people.
I thought it was also a really credulous article. I mean, I forget the specific claim, but there was one claim that like he was part of some effort to do some type of community support work, I want to say in Appalachia or something. And like, maybe he did, but it's just like, this isn't somebody that I would just sort of take their word for. I thought it was very...
That doesn't mean that racist people don't do good things.
No, totally not.
Sometimes
in
for
fact,
other people,
No, in fact, if you reported it and it was true, the implications of that are way more interesting and disturbing and dangerous than him just claiming it.
Yeah.
Like, oh, here's somebody who's actually leveraging urgent human need to spread a toxic ideology. That's a very important story right there. But I think that... And I also think, I don't know, there was that piece, did you read the piece in The Atlantic about the guy from Stormfront, I want to say?
I did not. Was that the Adam Serwer?
No, it wasn't Adam Serwer. No, it wasn't. It was a profile of, I think, this guy, Angeline. And I mean, I appreciated it. And they were obviously going for something different in the New York Times, and they couldn't be as acerbic. But to me, it's like, you can't cover... You can be clinical in an academic sense and not hysterical because we need to understand who these people are. Like, this weekend on the Illicit History, I'm having Angela Nagel on. I think she writes very intelligently about the alt-right. But if you're especially going to get into sort of like personal psychographic motivations, I just think you got to reduce them to what they are.
Yeah.
And they're really, really despicable people.
Well, one thing, too, that, came out of that discussion that we had, which was interesting, and we're certainly not all the way there, but we were even just comparing the way that reporting is done on kind of white nationalism, racism in general, and the way that now we're talking about sexual harassment and sexual assault and gender dynamics in general. It's like, Jack Smith, my guest at the time, said, can you imagine if in the reporting about Harvey Weinstein, the story was really about like a profile about Harvey? And like a look
shockingly polite.
A look inside his mind and what makes him tick.
Do you mind if I jerk off in the ficus? Thank you. Surprisingly polite. Although the thing about Harvey is that if you did a straight profile like that next to the white nationalist guy, it would be even more fucked up because you come away being like, I got to hang out with that white nationalist guy instead of Harvey Weinstein. Jesus, because even the most straight profile of Harvey Weinstein, you're like, this guy's a monster.
It would be gross. But still, it's like we come a little further,
right?
In reporting on this one issue. Right. We still have a very, very long way to go when it comes to reporting about race, racism, and but power dynamics in general, kind of as a whole. There has been some great writing from a lot of women. Rebecca Traister had a great piece in New York Mag yesterday about, how this whole conversation about sexual misconduct, it's not about just the sex. It's about work, it's about harassment. It's about women. Yeah, it's about bullying, but it's about women, and it's about the fact that there are too many men in positions of power, and this is why they've been able to take advantage of this. Too many women who are trying to get a job, keep a job, whatever it is, who feel who have been victimized or maybe have been told that being victimized in that way is just part of how it goes. And so, it's like you need to really distort and uproot the very foundations upon which kind of our work culture and so much else, has been built, which is this inequity that exists between the sexes. And so, yeah, I mean, just when it comes to the power stuff, like I said, long way to go. And, I actually want to bring something up, too, that I haven't actually been allowed or been told if I'm allowed to talk about
Can
this.
I have my board up, please? Thank you. Would you say that again? You haven't been allowed, if you can set it up again.
No, I just mean I didn't screen this before.
I love it. Go ahead. She hasn't screened this before.
My soon-to-be future mother-in-law was a prima ballerina for the New York City Ballet. So annoying. It's a really serious story I'm about to tell.
Oh, okay. And reset it. I'm sorry.
And so I don't know if you've seen, there's been reporting about Peter Martins, who's the director of the New York City Ballet.
Is this yet another story?
Yet another, creep who has been running the New York City Ballet and the Academy there for decades at this point, who has a history of, what's been coming out of domestic abuse, of physical and verbal abuse to lots of people who he was, teaching. And the whole point is that this is a guy in, like many other industries, where it's so subjective, where the director of the dance company, gets to pick who are going to be the principal dancers, who's going to get what role. So much of that is based on your relationship with him. And he has a very, very horrible reputation for really abusing that power.
And as he always has, because the thing that's also been disturbing about this is that some people, it's like, apparently it's a shock to everybody. And then with many other people, I mean, I use the example of Harvey Weinstein. Like I've heard rumors about Harvey Weinstein. like, why would I do, like, I'm not in the film industry. I don't have any,
Yeah.
But I've heard
But that's the thing
some of these
about
people,
it,
so
right?
is he another person that has it been a sort of open secret for quite some time?
I think so. I'm not super qualified to say, but so she wrote a piece in like Dance Magazine today, which was just very brief, but it was a little op-ed about how, the focus is all off because sure, Peter Martins now has taken a leave of absence. More and more reporting keeps coming out about people who are victims of his. But what about the New York City Ballet and the board and the people on that board who, for decades were covering this up? And I feel the same way about, NBC and CBS and Fox News. And it's like none of these things were happening in a vacuum. If the rumors exist outside of the newsroom or outside of that organization, that means they certainly exist within. And none of these people are going to be held accountable. Nothing's going to happen to the people that like sit on this board or to executives that protected these predators for decades.
Well, I mean,
and that pisses
is that
me off.
the next stage of this conversation?
I hope so.
I mean, because if we say it won't happen. It can be like a self-fulfilling prophecy. I mean, I agree with you. It's obviously
so make it happen. Make it happen.
I mean, that's
I'm gonna will it into existence.
I mean, what else could possibly set up a scenario where this isn't replicated in a different way? If you don't have a more structural readjustment.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with you, and it is kind of stunning. I mean, it's not like safe ground to impugn people's motives, but like every time just these sort of general breakdown around all of these stories, like, oh, it was such a shock, oh, it was such, and it's like, oh, really? Because you read any of these accounts, it's like, this is like overt systemic behavior. This isn't like some, that was what somebody was doing in their own free time, and it's disturbing to find out. It was integrated into all of these work cultures.
Yeah, it's
so
like,
what are you talking
Matt
about?
Lauer had a button that made his office into a rape chamber in NBC. Sorry, I've been using the word rape chamber a lot to describe that.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. But then I guess I want to loop back to, because to me, like, that does reinforce my, like, we are infinitely away from where we would want or need to be in those issues. But in one zone of the country, we're having that conversation, and we're teasing things apart, and we're distinguishing between, because I think, by the same token, like, I think what happened with Matt Taibbi is absolutely ridiculous, right? Like, and then there's other things that it's like, Harvey Weinstein shouldn't be just like a business and sort of national humiliation story. I think it's absolutely a criminal story, and I think in some of these, I would be interested in what the kind of larger criminal case around some of these work organizations are. Sort of like like really essentially like corporate sexual terrorism. And then they're going to elect, and I'm not saying this to like make the cheap point. I'm saying
it's
like
not a cheap point. No, it's very real.
So that is far beyond like we're in different bubbles.
Yes.
That is a fundamentally different moral trajectory.
We exist on different planets. But that doesn't mean, because I also saw a lot of people after Al Franken resigned saying, you know, like, well, he shouldn't have done that given what Republicans are doing. And I disagree, right? If we're going to hold ourselves to a certain standard that we believe is higher and better and different than their standard, then we can't use their lack of action there as an excuse.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think there's other questions. Like, I guess with Franken, I sort of generally still have like I believe in like I like the idea of like have an ethics process, you know?
Yeah.
I like I'm more, and I also think like, you know, and this is what's going to be really disgusting and really like, embarrassing, honestly, is like being like, okay, so like, again, ideologically, I would want Conyers to have a full ethics investigation process as well. I also think like those charges to me are like tantamount to rape, and multiple women have said it, and probably you should just go, right? And then like Franken, it's this juvenile, disgusting, abusive thing, and you know, maybe there can be a process. Like but I don't think anybody, and I hope people are not saying that like the answer is like, well, I'll trade you a pedophile for a groper. I hope that that's not the big takeaway. I mean, I think we need to be honest about the politics of things, and because this stuff is going to get weaponized.
Yeah, that's an interesting. I went on MSNBC a couple weeks ago, and you know, it was one of those situations where like I'm all prepped to talk about Russia because they had passed a law where they were going to make foreign media organizations register as foreign agents, kind of their
here.
No, Russia passed a similar law.
I see. Okay.
You know, it's this like endless tit for tat right now. And so, you know, I'm like 10 seconds before I'm going live and they're like, hey, we have breaking news. We're changing the story. You ready to talk about Franken? And I was like, sure. You know,
I like that.
Well, I mean, what are you going to do?
Sure.
You're already sitting in the chair.
I like that. Hold my beer.
So I had said something, you know, to the effect of, you know, Republicans will use this Franken thing if he stays around to justify
no doubt.
Roy Moore.
No doubt.
And the amount of Twitter hate that I got from people who, you know, claimed that I then compared what Franken did to pedophilia. And it was, you know, it's all like lefty MSNBC viewers. And that's just every single time I go on, like there's no way to have nuanced conversation. And so I feel like we do have to acknowledge that, you know, people on the left are just as bad with that recently, where you can't say anything without people immediately jumping, you know, to assumptions without them really listening to what it is that you're saying and becoming total hacks.
Every subculture of politics has a dum-dum filter right now.
Yeah.
There's no doubt, including even some of my, you know, good Bernie people, no doubt.
I just want to make one quick point about the ethics thing with Franken, is I agree with you.
Yeah.
I also think and I think this is a big if that I'm not convinced about at all, but if Franken has been wronged in this case, he's a victim of the ethics, the broken ethics investigation process that has been basically protecting the accused for so long,
doubt.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And if we had a working process, then Franken it would have been easier for him to say, I'm going to go through this process. But because that's completely broken,
I think that's a really good point.
Yeah.
I mean, how long is an ethics investigation going to take? And not to mention, like, one of the things that I did not know before all of this came up was that, you know, how hard it is for anybody who works on Capitol Hill to try to report their own experiences of sexual harassment or assault, and then the taxpayers foot the bill.
Well, of
which I'm not
course.
surprised, but it's like, oh, then we're paying for your, you know, misdeeds for some fucking creep. Really pisses me off.
Yeah.
Farenthold?
There is some indirect way that you and I's money has gone to Blake Farenthold. Please don't pull up the picture. To settle a sexual harassment case. And that is literally nauseating. Look, I want to get to the post game, but I need to leave my people in the public version of the show with something slightly less nauseating and depressing.
Okay, we need some positivity.
We've hit every single, and you got annoyed, but I was keeping it funny, and then we went into it, and now it's like, whoa, The world
I
is
know.
bleak.
I didn't mean to be annoyed.
Yeah. No, it's fine. No, you should. I mean, we should be all more than annoyed.
Yeah, but you gotta find a way to bring some humor.
Yeah.
Some light into the dark.
I mean, honestly, because what else is there to do? I mean, like, I think that this could potentially, like, there could be a very significant boomerang effect. But in some ways, like, and I'm completely contradicting myself here. I mean, I think that there is an opening for really serious and much more kind of fundamental change. But on the other hand, it's like, this could be a period of time where a almost certain pedophile gets elected to the Senate, and not just a tax bill, I mean a structural readjustment package of like the type of thing that would, get exported by the World Bank to like Argentina in the 1980s is about to get passed finally through Congress, right? And it's going to devastate people across the board who aren't ultra wealthy. And like we're in this kind of like full predator place. And I guess my only hope would be if this stuff gets laid bare, from assault to class war, and there's no varnish on it, then I guess you don't have a choice but to be, at the very least, sort of real about what we're in. And maybe that could lead to positive things.
I hope so. I'm always for all kinds of just transparency, honesty, self-reflection, which I think that we really desperately need as a country. But it's like, it still just doesn't feel like we've hit rock bottom, because you'd think that at some point, that would have had any kind of effect yet. But I will say, I guess if there is any kind of positive there, it's that the way that our political system is set up, it does swing back and forth because people don't stay in power forever. And it makes our political process frustratingly slow sometimes, because it's like, oh, we're like inching towards like progress and change and some kind of action, when it comes to environmental policy. And then you can have a Donald Trump take power and the pendulum swings all the way back in the other direction. But at least there's some kind of self-correcting mechanism that we have there. And so if we have to have any kind of
self-correcting mechanism. It's a self-correcting mechanism.
But it's not self-correcting, right? As a voter,
that is definitely not my Arabic signature on that yearbook. It's a lie. It's total fake news.
Listen, you made me do something positive. I'm trying here, okay?
I'm just going to leave them laughing. That's really the best answer. Look, we're totally fucked. Everything's a nightmare. But it's a good Obama impression.
By the way, we're going to replay on the way out the Shapiro Danarchy clip.
Yes, we're going to play the Shapiro Danarchy clip. We're going to be on the post game in about 5 minutes. Alyona, thank you as always. You're going to be continuing with us in the post game. Patrons, honestly, the growth has been incredible out of the gate. That's positive news to leave everybody on. This show's doing really well.
Congratulations.
Yeah, there you go. And obviously, when you join, you get the post game. We're, in addition to your calls and IMs, and you can join us at 646-257-3920. The IMs will be on in a moment. We're going to play some sound from Sarah Huckabee. That'll elevate Alyona's mood. We'll talk about Jerusalem. We have some sound from the EU foreign policy chief. More hijinks. Alyona actually would like to test drive her Obama impression, so we're going to get to that in the fun half as well, in the post game as well. And then, of course, there are illicit histories and primers, which you get. Recent one with Ken Silverstein on how lobbying actually works in Washington. Corey Pine and I on the history of Silicon Valley fascism. It's a fascinating, disturbing history. The Discord community is on 24/7. It's a very large, active community, and there's many, many, many other benefits. Plus, you sustain and grow this fully independent show. The only overlord I have to worry about is the guy who makes those horrible Roman Polanski jokes on Twitter. Besides that, I am totally free. I want to thank David Slavic. I want to thank David Grishcom. I want to thank super producer Matt Leck. We are going to go out with DJ Danarchy, and we will see patrons and welcome new patrons in the post game. We'll be on in about 5 minutes. Keep spreading the word. Ooh. 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 I really think that if Gandhi was alive today, he'd be contributing columns to Breitbart.
Seriously, this is not a joke. The only real privilege in America is American privilege.
That guy's such a fucking moron.
The Michael Brooks Show is funny. I never realized it was like kind of like a comedy show.
None of you are as funny as Jerry Seinfeld.
Facts don't care about your feelings.
You cut that out now, or you'll go home in an ambulance.
World star, baby, world star.
Yeah, that seems mildly inappropriate for a political discussion.
And there you go, bada bing, bada fucking boom. Another win. Another win.
Mike is smart. Ooh, Mike is smart. Ooh, Mike is Mike is smart. Mike is smart, dude. Mike is smart. Ooh, Mike, dude.
Patreon/TMBS.
Don't get triggered. Snowflakes.
These are facts, and facts don't care about.
Hey, shut up.
These people make Saddam Hussein look like a choir boy. A choir boy.
That's the hook, man.
Mike is smart. Mike is smart. Ooh, Mike is smart. Ooh, dude.
That's the hook, man.
Mike is smart. Mike is smart, dude. Mike is
That's the hook, man.
That's a sexist microaggression because he's treating her like she's a helpless female. Of course, he's also treating her like she's a woman. But how would he know?
Because I met her, you dumb fuck.
These people make Saddam Hussein look like a choir boy.
Old pasty devil.
That's the hook, man.
I think it's very important to say, I'm a fat little redhead.
Old pasty devil.
That's the hook, man.
Only in the White Devil Society could a little freak like that get this far.
That's the hook, man.
Patreon/TMBS.
That's the hook, man. 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 That's the hook, man.
Patreon/TMBS.